Hi everyone, and welcome back to the den. Before we start today's video, I'd like to take a moment of your time just to say that I do not recommend that you attempt what I did in this video. If you are not prepared, it is a lot of weight and equipment for you to carry long distance on your back on uneven ground. It is very dangerous and can easily go very bad. Also, the plan was that I would present it to you as I normally do in this type of manner. However, because of the poor weather, this was not possible as the audio was not usable. Not to mention the very poor visibility. Because of this video was recorded approximately 20 minutes before we reached the summit. Because I can't present it to you the way that I want to present it, I made a decision that I was going to film the process, and now I will do a audio voiceover telling you what I am doing. To add to all this bad luck, before we left the campsite to head for the summit, one of the pots of honey that I use, like this one, had broke, resulting in me needing to use less water on the actual video. I did amend this when I got home. I added the extra pot of honey and more water to it to counter what it should have been. I will also show that the gravity stayed the same. I'm not taking into account that it did have probably about a day of fermenting, as at that stage it's very slow and very minor. And without any more hesitations, this is a Welsh Mead at the top of Snowdon.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be making you something very special. Today I'm making a Welsh Meadow from the top of Wales' highest mountain. This is Snowdon. Snowdon is situated north of Wales and its summit being 1,085 metres above sea level. In Welsh folklore, the summit of Snowdon is where the tomb of Rita Gawr, a giant. Rita Gawr wore a cloak made of men's beards and was slain by none other than King Arthur. Arthur and his men buried his body under those giant boulders at the top of the summit. It is also said that the famous sword used by Arthur, Excalibur, was thrown into one of Snowdon's beautiful lakes, where the lady of the lake caught the sword, shook the sword in the air 3 times before withdrawing it back into the lake, where the sword lies to this day, waiting for the return of King Arthur and his brave knights, who were said to be resting in one of the caves in Snowdonia, waiting for the call to return and rescue Wales once again. And let's not forget about Merlin, often depicted as King Arthur's mystical companion, although there are surprisingly not so many stories of this duo. Merlin does have a significant role in Snowdonia's past, as well as the importance of the Welsh Red Dragon. On the peak of this mystical mountain is where we are going to make today's mead. Meadow is an ancient mead variety that was typically flavoured with herbs and spices. The first written evidence of the name stems from 16th century Wales. The honey base of the Meadow would have been spiced with many ingredients and spices such as cinnamons and cloves or nutmeg. All these things were added. The word metheglin derives from the Welsh for mead, which is medd. A metheglin came from the combination of meddig, meaning healing or medicine, and llyn, for liquor. This drink which would have contained ancient herbs and spices to create this magical drink filled with spiritual healing properties, is the inspiration for today's ingredients. All of these ingredients I have picked up locally from a supermarket, or I have foraged from a local field. So the ingredients using today are 250 grams of chopped root ginger. All I did with this was measure it out and chop it into thin slices. I then put it in a bag and put it in the fridge. The next ingredient on my list is 100 grams of Meadow sweet, which I foraged from a local farm. Meadow sweet, or commonly known as Mead's wort, is what they used to flavour mead centuries ago. If you'd like a video where I just use that, comment down below. The next ingredient I use is 2 bags of mint leaf at 30 grams each, so 60 grams in total. With this I left them in their packaging so they don't spoil. I then measure out 15 grams of cloves and add that to a sealable bag. After the cloves, I measure out 60 grams of elderberries. I then add these to the bag with the cloves in to keep them together. I then chopped up 8 sticks of lemongrass. I also put these in one of the big sealable bags. And I also put these in the fridge to keep nice and cool and fresh. I will also be using 2 cinnamon sticks, which I will just break up and chuck in the bag on the day. As for the honey, I'm just using a Welsh Honey. I intended on using 3.8 kilograms, but as I said in the earlier part of the video, one of the full tubs did break, so I had to account for this when I got back home. I will also be adding 2 tea bags to a bottle of water, but I'll get onto that in a second. And the yeast I'm using today is Lalvin 71B. These ingredients are just my own personal choice of herbs and spices. If you like, you could use a more mixed spices to make yourself a Christmas style mead, which is proving to be quite popular. Personally, I am aiming for more of an earthy flavour. There are also recipes suggesting that you boil your ingredients, strain them, and then use the water from that in your must. Today, I'm going to simplify it by adding all my ingredients into a corded straining bag and placing this bag into the must, which I will leave for several weeks during the fermentation process. To start, I'm going to rehydrate the yeast in this little bottle of water that I have. I'm just going to pour the whole packet in here, shake it about a bit, and leave it to the side. While that's waiting on the side, I can do the other bits. I'm now going to add my pre-weighed honey into the fermenter and then fill the fermenter almost halfway with the water. The water that I am using today is just bottled spring water. I was intending on using water that had come from springs of Snowdon in the hope that it might add a little bit of magic to our meddling. However, after much thought about it, the likelihood of it being contaminated water and infecting the brew, I've chosen not to use it. Of course, I could have taken the water from a fast flowing stream and risked it, or I could have boiled the water first, but that would have required more equipment and time spent. I do have plans to make a completely natural mead using wild honey and natural springs and let it ferment naturally. If this sounds like something that you're interested in, please consider subscribing. With the fermenter being half full, I can stir it and slosh it around a bit to blend in the honey as well as introduce oxygen into the must. Now that that is done, I'm just going to add the tea that has been resting in one of the water bottles. The tea just adds more tannins and more of a mouthy feel to the brew. I then just top it up with the rest of the water. To take a hydrometer reading, I'll take a little sample into this test tube and then drop in a hydrometer. This can be done prior to or after adding the herbs and spices. As you can see, trying to take the hydrometer reading was proving to be quite difficult, as you need to have a flat level surface. We did try moving it around a little bit to get a flat level surface, but in the end I ended up just holding it as level as I can, and the reading that I got was 1.100. Now that I have done that, I can now add all my herbs and spices to the corded straining bag. I think I did oversize this straining bag, but I'd rather go bigger than not have a big enough bag. I'm starting off by adding the elderberries and the cloves. There's a rather unique smell to this, which just reminded me of Jägermeister. Next I added the chopped lemongrass. I then added the 250 grams of chopped root ginger. And the smell coming from the bag at the moment was fantastic. Very herbal, very spicy, very earthy like I was after. Now I'm just taking the cinnamon sticks out of the packet, just 2 cinnamon sticks, and chucking them straight in the bag. This now is the Meadow sweet that I foraged. I ended up double bagging it just to keep it as fresh as possible. There wasn't as much of a scent coming from this as I thought there would be, but I just chucked all that in. And then last off I'm just adding the 60 grams of mint leaf. The smell from this bag was very refreshing, very minty. Could potentially do with less mint, so it doesn't overpower the rest of the flavours. It's all trial and error. So I'll just tighten it as much as I can, tie it up, and then I try to use the remaining of the string to tie the bag itself closed, as there was still a bit of a gap and I didn't want anything coming out of the bag. I then add this bag to the fermenter and submerge it as much as possible. as the ingredients will then take in the fluid and will expand. And then with my spoon, just pushing it around, trying to get all the fluid into the bag to mix in with the flavours. And then in with the yeast. So in this short little clip I took when I got back home, I filled it up with the extra powder honey and topped it up with water and kept the gravity the same. A few days later, you can see it is fermenting nicely.
Okay guys, that's where I'm going to leave this video. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I know it didn't turn out quite the way I wanted it to do. I might even attempt to make this again, but with a different set of ingredients. Who knows? Just because it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, doesn't mean that it was a failure. It just goes to show that sometimes things don't go to plan, and it's best to just work with what you've got. After all, after lugging all that equipment up to the top of the mountain, I wasn't really going to not do it. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, a share and a comment down below. I'd really appreciate that, as it would help grow the channel. If you'd like to see the sort of behind the scenes of making this video, I did make a vlog which will be shown here. And until next time, cheers.